The Arado Ar-234 Blitz bombers, often known as Lightnings in English, was a visually striking and powerful German aircraft that became the world's first operational jet-powered reconnaissance bomber. Arado Flugzeugwerke built this revolutionary aircraft, which was propelled by two Junkers Jumo 004 turbojets. It was designed to outperform fast Allied aircraft, such as the de Havilland Mosquito. The Blitz, as it was nicknamed, flew only a few missions as a bomber. However, on the rare occasions it flew, the plane proved to be faster than anything the Allies could put in the air. Perhaps under different conditions, the Ar-234 could have dominated the European skies. However, the Blitz entered World War II too late to have a significant impact. Its most noteworthy action was with the KG-76 unit, in the attempt to destroy the Ludendorff Bridge, one of the few remaining crossings on the Rhine River's west bank. Some scholars feel that had its flaws been addressed sooner, the bomber could have delayed the Allies' victory and forced a more favorable resolution to the conflict. The aircraft's operational history was cut short by the fall of the Third Reich. Today, a single Ar-234 survives. It stands in a museum not merely as a preserved machine, but as a tangible link to a pivotal moment in history, a silent witness to a technological revolution, and a potent symbol of a potential that was never fully realized. By 1943, the Luftwaffe research effort had culminated in the Arado Ar-234. Known as the Blitz, the new jet-powered aircraft took aerial warfare to a whole new level. The Ar-234, which could fly higher and faster than any contemporary Allied aircraft, was ideal for reconnaissance and served as the precursor to modern-day high-altitude surveillance planes like the U-2 and SR-71. On the battlefield, the capacity to observe and anticipate enemy movement has always been critical. With the advent of observation balloons, like the World War I, Corcat-competent observers could see beyond enemy lines from well above the trenches. Larger, lighter-than-air vehicles such as the giant Zeppelin advanced the art of aerial surveillance. But balloons and airships were incredibly fragile. So conventional planes were quickly deployed. With the introduction of aerial photography, positions deep within enemy lines could be documented on film and returned for examination. However, reconnaissance planes were often armed and faced significant casualties. When war started anew in Europe, Nazi forces gained a crucial advantage by identifying enemy locations well before the fight began. Observation from above took several forms, including the Luftwaffe's Fieseler Storch. The Germans used a Storch, which could land and take off almost anywhere, to release Mussolini from his mountain captivity in 1943. The two-seat plane was an aerodynamic marvel with a variety of high-lift systems, including fixed full-span leading-edge slots, full flaps, and massive control surfaces, as well as bulging side windows that provided the finest view possible for its two crewmen. The Henschel parasol-winged HS-126 was a significantly heavier aircraft. The 126, the Luftwaffe's first all-metal short-range reconnaissance plane, was frequently deployed to ground forces and saw substantial service on the Russian front. The Focke-Arch-Gelles rotor kite was more compact and used as a high observation platform for submariners at sea. Although it was barely capable of carrying a single person, the U-boat's modified helicopter rotor offered lift and control as it dragged the kite into the air. But probably the most odd observation plane tested by the Luftwaffe was Blum and Voss's asymmetric V-141, designed by Dr. Richard Vogt. The aircraft was designed as a light observation and bombing platform. The plane was moderately successful and saw action on the Eastern Front in 1941. The engine torque balanced out the awkwardly situated cockpit. This actually worked rather well. Not to be left behind, the Allies were developing their own observation and reconnaissance aircraft. It paid off with the British all-wood de Havilland Mosquito. Mosquitoes traveled at great speeds, necessitating the use of advanced aerial cameras. This plywood flying vehicle destroyed around 600 V-1 flying bombs and was so fast that just one plane was lost for every 2,000 flights. United States reconnaissance operations utilizing aircraft like Lockheed's F-5, a photo reconnaissance variant of the P-38 Lightning, were equally effective. Sophisticated high-resolution cameras positioned in the plane's nose ensured that timely information streamed continuously from the front. Images of enemy activity kept Allied commanders informed on a daily and even hourly basis. The film was processed in the field, providing commanders with real-time intelligence throughout the battle. The art of reconnaissance had advanced significantly since the days of the observation balloon. The Lightning was the perfect platform for the cameras it carried. It was capable of flying extremely great distances due to its speed stability and maneuverability. The plane's twin engines provided pilots with a level of confidence that their single-engine counterparts could only dream of. The Lightning was huge, having a spacious nose compartment that could transport a lot of photographic equipment into the air. It was capable of flying extremely great distances due to its speed stability and maneuverability. The plane's twin engines provided pilots with confidence that their single-engine counterparts could only dream of. The Lightning was huge, having a spacious nose compartment that could transport a lot of photographic equipment into the air. The plane was regularly armed with 50 caliber machine guns in its roomy nose compartment, which also proved ideal for cameras because they shook less away from the engines and offered crisper images. In Germany, the Focke-Wulf FW-189 also served as a short-range reconnaissance aircraft that worked closely with ground forces. It was purpose-built with extensive blazing to provide the three-person crew with superb all-round view. It worked primarily on the Eastern Front. The Dornier Du 335 Arrow was designed for high-speed offensive bombing, but it was also a natural reconnaissance aircraft capable of outpacing anyone attempting to catch it. What distinguished it was the plane's unusual combination of pusher and puller propellers. It was the fastest piston-powered machine during the conflict. Heinkel's He-280 launched a new era in aerial reconnaissance, and with the development of practical jet engines, performance improved dramatically. These innovative engines would allow reconnaissance planes to cruise over enemy territory with impunity for the first time. Though the He-280 made history as the world's first jet fighter to fly, it was no match for Messerschmitt's amazing Me-262, the first jet fighter in battle. This shark-shaped killer was 100 miles per hour faster than any Allied aircraft. The Junkers Jumo 04, the world's first jet engine to be produced, was the driving force behind the 2622's success. Though notoriously cantankerous, it generated approximately 2,000 pounds of thrust. Despite having a lifespan of only tens of hours, it was cutting edge for its day. The German military machine rose from the ruins of World War I. Hitler intended to construct a Reich that would last 1,000 years. As a terrified world watched Luftwaffe formations began to dominate the skies, Germany's aviation industry expanded dramatically. Contractors unleashed a stream of aircraft. Bombers, fighters, trainers, and transporters rolled off the assembly lines. Despite the constraints set by the Versailles Treaty output, rates increased dramatically. And the German people now back at work saw Adolf Hitler as their most revered leader in memory. Arado, for example, produced hundreds of planes, some under license and others of their own design. They featured the AR-195 torpedo bomber and the 198 reconnaissance planes. The Arado 231 could be disassembled packed in a 6.5-foot diameter tube and utilized by submariners to detect targets beyond the Periscope's visible range. The AR-240 was a sophisticated combat aircraft with features such as a tail-mounted air brake. Its responsibilities included high-speed reconnaissance. In December 1942, political pressure led to the program's termination. Arado's AR-232, with its unusual landing gear, was the Luftwaffe's effort to replace the iconic Ju-52 tri-motor transport. The AR-232, also known as the millipede, had 11 idler wheels that supported the aircraft's weight during loading and unloading. However, by the conclusion of the war, the most advanced production aircraft was the jet-propelled Tu-34. From stem to stern, it was a stunning aircraft. The Junkers Jumo 004 turbojet engines were cutting-edge and positioned below the wing for simple access. Each Jumo included a small gasoline starter engine that could be started either electrically from the cockpit or manually by pulling a D-ring located in the intake bullet. Another method of turning over the Jumos was a gasoline-powered machine that sped the turbines to ignition revolutions per minute. The downside was that only one engine could be started at once. The Tu-34 was launched from a T-shaped three-wheeled reusable cart. 3 massive manual jacks hoisted the airplane high enough to accommodate the trolley underneath. The high-speed taxi trials of the setup were successful. Therefore, the decision was made to proceed with actual flight testing.
The trolley stayed on the ground, and you jumped out. And at the same time, when the brake lines broke to the trolley, because I was connected with brake lines to the 2 trams on the right and left side, yeah. They broke, and at the same time, a parachute on the trolley was released to break off the trolley, because I had to use it afterwards again. They were made to measure, or adjusted to measure for each aircraft. So I had to have a good conditioned trolley again afterwards.
However, not all trolley tests went successfully. The landing skid provided a stable, appropriate method of returning the plane to Earth. The landing runs were of average length. However, as airspeed decreased, the jet had a tendency to roll to one side. The hydraulically retractable main skid was located on the aircraft's centerline with 2 retractable outriggers beneath the engines. The trolley had brakes on each main wheel, a castering nose wheel, and quick-release mechanisms. However, when airspeed decreased, the jet rolled to one side. The hydraulically retractable main skid was located on the aircraft's centerline with 2 retractable outriggers beneath the engines. The trolley had brakes on each major gear, a castering nose wheel, and quick-release mechanisms. In some testing, the trolley landing gear was installed, but it proved to be too heavy for the jet, reducing performance. Some landings were near disasters. Because of the trolley's high center of gravity, control was readily lost, and damage was frequently sustained. The trolley's brakes were unreliable, and they were particularly sensitive to a pilot with heavy feet. During test landings and takeoffs, the trolley's balloon-like tires served as shock absorbers for the hefty equipment. This trolley, not designed for the punishment of landing, breaks down on the rocky terrain at the end of the runway. It was difficult to land on the skid in such basic conditions. Initial expectations that the trolley system would reduce weight and internal space proved unfounded. Conventional landing gear would eventually need to be designed for the plane. The pilots entered the cockpit through a plexiglass door above the seat. The liberal use of plexiglass provided Luftwaffe pilots with an unprecedented perspective of the outside world. Basteron.
Set it up, machine, lined it up, landed on the speed, let it scratch a little bit, let it on the nose, and then like greased lightning on the wet lawn, there was a thunderstorm coming through, and it was like soap. My aircraft didn't break, and I landed in the wheat field. And that was it nearly burned the aircraft because the exhaust jets fired the wheat.
The early AR-234 skid landing gear had significant advantages and limitations. It allowed a pilot to land practically any place, including dirt, grass, snow, and ice. But after that, he had very little control and no brakes. Keeping the aircraft upright was more a matter of luck than expertise. The sensation of powerlessness and lack of control frequently make the closing seconds of a landing nerve-wracking.
Came to a halt, and the crew came with their lifting gear and lifted it up. The tricycle was pushed underneath, locked with a bomb locked, and then with a tractor you were towed away. You were completely immobile with the aircraft alone. You couldn't taxi now. But of course it was a relief after we got our undercarriage.
Nonetheless, hundreds of successful landings on a variety of surfaces demonstrated the skid's functionality. To alleviate some of the concerns about breaking certain test planes, were outfitted with a drag chute that unfolded as soon as the aircraft touched the ground. Mounted in a ventral canister, the chute reduced the landing run and became a standard feature on all subsequent AR-234s. The chute canister had a cable-activated release that could be controlled from the cockpit. D-Day June 6, 1944, brought the Luftwaffe's urgent need for a quick reconnaissance aircraft to a head.
So I did the first reconnaissance flight over the invasion front on the 2nd of August, which rates as the first jet reconnaissance flight, operational flight in the world.
The speed of the AR-234 met all of the Luftwaffe's expectations. Allied fighters had little chance of destroying it as a reconnaissance platform. Ironically, one of the new jets was hit by friendly fire during the first mission.
We did the whole invasion front. I did southern England, all the airfields of the southern part of England, or the Americans. Yes, it was like one airfield, the whole area. It was incredible what was built up down there. I bring pictures back that the V1 and the V2 didn't wipe London out and didn't wipe the British resistance out. That was all the time the propaganda of Himmler. Huh? People said, just hold out on the Eastern Front 1 more week, our wonder weapons will destroy London and England will drop out and the United States will drop out with it. So that was it. And I bring pictures back now. Everything is intact in London. Huh? On the way out, I met a mosquito. A mosquito came this way, I went that way. We could wave one another. He had no weapon, probably. I had no weapon. We couldn't do anything.
Exchanging nods or waves. Such unusual greetings were not uncommon in the skies above Europe. Landings tended to be graceful and well planned. The plane's approach speed was well within most pilots' capabilities. Touchdown occurred at 91 miles per hour with a landing distance of approximately 1,500 feet. Due to a lack of Junkers Jumo 004 jet engines, much of which went to the Messerschmitt 262 Arado, resorted to BMW for his new 4-engined AR-234. The 4 BMWs produced a greater thrust-to-weight ratio, giving the Blitz somewhat more power. The new configuration was tested with each engine in its own nacelle. However, heavy drag and poor stability necessitated a simpler structure. With 2 engines in each nacelle, the plane was more aerodynamic than its predecessor. Early concerns about the skid gear prompted Arado to modify the aircraft with a normal tricycle system. The resulting AR-234B was slightly larger, but essentially unchanged with strong retractable landing gear. The heavy-duty nose gear retracted rearward, while the main landing gear retracted forward. The main gear well filled a space that had formerly housed a fuel cell. Arado enlarged the fuselage to accommodate the main gear and its retraction assembly. However, the redesigned landing gear was not as effective as the Luftwaffe had intended. Though it made the plane far more maneuverable on the ground, the short track made landings and takeoffs difficult. Furthermore, The huge tires designed for rough, unprepared airfields provided the pilot with a smooth, roller coaster-like ride. However, the ability to eliminate the cumbersome trolley system and swiftly clear landing zones for returning aircraft made any shortcomings with the new method appear small. The Junkers and BMW power units were both exceedingly thirsty, as were most first-generation jet engines. Range was always crucial. In an attempt to extend the Blitz's limited time, aloft jettisonable 66-gallon fuel tanks were attached from racks beneath the engines. The plane's internal fuel load of 814 gallons was carried in two flexible rubberized tanks located in the fuselage. Maximum range varied from 415 miles at sea level to approximately 1,000 miles at 30,000 feet. The low thrust of the Junkers and BMW turbojets resulted in unnecessarily protracted takeoff runs. As a result, the plane was frequently equipped with rocket-assisted takeoff, or RATO units. Each supplied an additional 100 pounds of thrust and burned out within seconds of leaving the ground. The Smithsonian Institution in Washington houses the only known surviving AR-234 with radio units. Essentially, a modular power egg with a rocket engine within it was used to launch a variety of Luftwaffe aircraft. The little rocket's largest component was a ball-shaped propellant tank, which was both complex and reliable. It included two propellants, T-Stoff and C-Stoff, which ignited upon contact. Stacked RATO units were kept empty and transported to a refueling station by a special dolly. C-Stoff, a water alcohol hydrazine catalyst, was relatively benign and did not require special care. T-Stoff, on the other hand, was highly hazardous, consisting mostly of hydrogen peroxide and a stabilizer. It was highly corrosive and dangerous to the touch, so ground crews dealing with it had to wear protective clothing. The units were reusable and included a small nose-mounted parachute that launched automatically. The rockets significantly enhanced aircraft performance, but once ignited, there was no going back. They may, however, be discarded in an emergency. In normal operation, the pilot would jettison the units when the rocket had burned out. They had to deploy simultaneously because a hanging rocket may send an unbalanced plane out of control. The RATO eggs were then retrieved and readied for reuse within hours. Following retrieval, the Walter RATO units were emptied of propellants by pushing water through with compressed air. Then they were inspected, returned to flying status, and stored. The AR-234 bomber, carrying 3 bombs and 2 RATO units, taxis out to the runway. 1 bomb is located beneath the fuselage, while 1 hangs from each engine nacelle. On this aircraft with conventional landing gear, the landing skid was replaced by a recessed bomb compartment. This simplified the aircraft. In October 1944, this Blitz was still a novelty. Pilot Horst Goertz is shown preparing for a reconnaissance trip over Allied targets, with the ground crew and casual onlookers gathered around the plane's transparent nose. The AR-234 was only vulnerable to assault during takeoff and landing, and this did occur. Both American and British fighters claimed AR-234 kills. Most were surprise assaults on unsuspecting Luftwaffe pilots who discovered the danger too late. The plexiglass was little over 0.2 of an inch thick, giving pilots an excellent forward visibility. Early AR-234s were nearly blind to the rear, but were eventually outfitted with an aft-looking periscope. The gadget was a life-saving innovation that allowed pilots to evade surprise rear attacks, which were almost always lethal. Erich Sommer came up with the idea for the periscope.
And this telescope was developed from a Panzer or tank telescope. It is heavy enough, rather for a tank than for an aircraft. But the idea was the pilot can look into the ocular here, and you saw out there above the horizon what is happening up there. Gave you a security that you had a clear sky behind you.
The besieged and outnumbered Luftwaffe crews resumed normal operations on the ground. Despite the fact that there appeared to be little they could do to stem the tide of conflict, the airmen attempted to maintain a positive attitude. A radio for communication with airborne teammates serves as the focal point of this action. Horst Goertz, on the left here, was an elite Luftwaffe pilot assigned to the AR-234. Horst and the others appear relaxed in this candid clip, captured by his colleague pilot and close friend, Erich Sommer. Unlike Allied pilots, Luftwaffe crews lacked a rotation system. They soared till they died or were defeated. For all of them, that day was quickly approaching. As the Allied noose tightened, Nazi troops defended German soil for the first time. Resistance grew bloodier and more passionate. Men and machines had suffered unimaginable losses. The Reich was crumbling due to a storm of its own making. Allied bomber assaults leveled cities and destroyed industries. And humanity was subjected to unprecedented carnage. The Allied bombing raids focused on Germany's surviving strategic resources. The large bomber formations targeted oil and gasoline refineries. However, if fuel supplies were depleted, the Reich's war machine would collapse. The Germans desperately attempted to relocate manufacturing underground. But by then, it was too late. The destruction was total. Abriswart.
From Lüttich, from Liège to the south to the Alps, there was no cover for reconnaissance. So I was transferred to Biblis with my own commando, one aircraft and the whole maintenance crew, and operated from a dreadful airfield. Very soggy, very foggy, bad weather, industrial area to the west, which drifted in the smoke and the mist. So I operated from there, the whole section between the Alps and Holland.
During the winter of 1944, Sommer's unit deployed a Kettenkrad tracked vehicle at Biblis to collect radar pods that had been jettisoned. Sommer's covered AR-234 withstood heavy snowfall. Landings and takeoffs from this facility were hazardous due to the tiny slot which allowed no space for human or mechanical failure. The sky above were not always silent. Overhead, you could see the contrails of Allied bombers and aircraft, as well as the twists and turns of a dogfight. Meanwhile, Sommer's aircraft was draped in tarpaulin below. The snow thawed in January 1945, allowing operations at Biblis to continue. On Christmas Eve 1944, an Allied air raid destroyed Sommer's AR-234. Though the hard winter of 1944 hindered Allied progress, once the snow thawed, their unrelenting pursuit of victory persisted. In northern Italy, the mud was attacked and sometimes overcome. The hazards appeared to be never-ending. There was no relief, and the trials were often unbearable. Fighting a war of desperation, they continued to spew lies of hope. Most people had lost hope long before. The AR-234 missions continued uninterrupted. As a bomber, it assaulted the Allies in Remagen. The Blitz's speed made it one of the few remaining German weapons capable of operating with relative impunity. Messerschmitt's Me-262 carried the ever-shrinking Luftwaffe. The Schwalbe, or Swallow, was a formidable target for Allied airmen due to its massive size and effectiveness. The new German jet fighter, which was only vulnerable during takeoff and landing, came too late. Germany's infrastructure crumbled before the Allied assault. The AR-234 bomber had been delayed, but when it eventually went to combat, it proved lethal. In her final moments, Nazi Germany launched roughly $3,000 V-2 rockets at England. With impact speeds of about 3,800 miles per hour, they were difficult to intercept. Germany's terror weapons were definitely the most advanced in the world. The AR-234, the world's best reconnaissance aircraft, gave Luftwaffe pilots enormous pride. It supplied excellent images for Wehrmacht leaders, and the Allies were embarrassed by the impunity with which it flew. The key bridges that crossed the Rhine served as primary reconnaissance targets for aircraft on both sides. Of course, the 234 was not invincible. This one did not survive. By the spring of 1945, Germany's military might have been defeated, and the Allies were advancing deep into the Third Reich. The number and variety of aircraft found on airfields across Europe was simply incredible. Many AR-234s were among the recovered aircraft. Under Operation Lusty, elite British and American recovery teams retrieved Luftwaffe aircraft of the Allies' highest technological interest, such as the AR-234. It was anticipated that researching their technology might benefit future Allied initiatives. Efforts increased when it became evident that the Russians had the same goal. The aircraft destined for the United States and Great Britain were flown to Cherbourg, France, and prepared for shipping. Among those rescued by Watson's raiders were two AR-234s, already painted with United States Army Air Force markings. Later cocooned for shipment, these Blitzes, along with many other models, began their lengthy transatlantic journey. Among the rarer gems carried into Cherbourg were a Heinkel 219 night fighter and a single-seat Me-262. Another find, a two-seat night-fighting version of the 262. It was the war's fastest night fighter, distinguished by an array of nose-mounted radar antennae. Ships transporting the captured planes departed the French coast and headed for America. The cocooning technique shielded these Dornier arrows from the saline conditions of the exposed deck. A single cocooned AR-234 is strapped to the deck close to the arrow. Today, only one AR-234 remains, as part of the Smithsonian's National Air and Space Museum collection. This airplane has been fully and thoroughly refurbished. General Fred Ascani was one of the few American pilots given the opportunity to fly the plane.
I had 5 or 6 flights on this aircraft. I enjoyed every one of them once you got the engine started. You felt very comfortable, like sitting in a living room chair. You had a better view than most airplanes, and it can be compared to a helicopter, which I've also flown quite a bit, where you have a bubble canopy and you have tremendous visibility. My recollection of the airplane was it's a very stable aircraft. It was very easy to fly. The greatest problem really was getting the engine started, and you felt 90% of the flight was over once that happened. It exhibited what we call cavitation, and the engines cavitated, which meant they were thrusting you forward and then dropping off. So you sort of went forward, you felt like you were going forward and backward, all on the whole time you're on the final approach to landing. And it's an eerie feeling unless you're aware of it. This airplane could have easily operated as a supplementary anti-bomber aircraft to supplement the Me-262 jet fighters, because it had the performance, which of course would provide the kind of performance needed to intercept the bomber formations. So if they'd had this in enough quantities, yes, it made a difference, absolutely. It could have been a very formidable weapon, yes.
Arado's legacy continued to take many forms after the war. Twin-engine jet-propelled bombers became the norm for military air services around the world. The most renowned of the early offspring was the English Electric Canberra, a light bomber and reconnaissance plane. The Canberra first flew in 1949. It had 2 crew members and a powerful bomb load. Designed as bombers' reconnaissance planes and test beds, the aircraft flew until the 1990s. The United States soon gained their own Canberra. It was called the B-57. Built by the Martin Company, it too became a jack-of-all-trades. Made for the United States Air Force as a night bomber, it differed from its British counterparts in that one crew member sat in front of the other rather than side by side. Special reconnaissance variants were produced with enlarged outer wing panels to provide more lift at high altitudes. To reduce weight, the plane's weaponry was eliminated entirely. Many of the big wing B-57s had cameras attached in the bomb bay, and by the mid-1960s, images could be shot from 60 miles distant with a resolution typically of 12 inches. 2 of the planes are still in service with NASA today. It hasn't flown in nearly half a century, and only one remains, an incredible achievement born out of a time of great hardship. Arado's AR-234 was both an excellent reconnaissance platform and a formidable bomber. The Lightning was known for its speed, which was often its only protection. It, like so many other weapons, represents the good and evil that exist in any scientific game. Its goal was violently clear: to allow men to kill life more efficiently. However, its breakthrough jet technology will enlighten and improve the lives of future generations.